What if you could help others to find the power to heal themselves? Physically, emotionally, and spiritually.
When I started teaching my classes, it was in 2002, and I was just doing the past life regressions and contacting the subconscious part. But then as the time went on and we found how powerful this was and what we could do with it, a lot of the students began saying, you know, advanced past life regression doesn't really tell what it's all about. This is so much more than that. We think you should change the name. So it was a few years ago we decided to change the name to Quantum Healing Hypnosis Technique. And this is the healing technique that we've now been teaching it, well, since 2002, that's 12 years.
What if you could time travel with them? Visit mythical places or angelic realms, other worlds, other galaxies. Help others to speak to their higher selves. You can. Dolores has taught thousands of people from across the world how to use QHHT, and now you can learn her method by going directly to dolorescannon.com. And don't forget to mention the discount code MORETALKS. Have you ever wondered, can you communicate directly with spirit guides, teachers, or non-physical consciousness, or even our higher selves? What would they tell us? My name is Kevin Moore, and since 2015, I started to practice a form of communication which is termed channeling. I have been interviewing experts on my talk show to find out, does life continue after we die? And can we communicate with those that have crossed over? With each expert I spoke to, they all had different ideas. Is there knowledge from the past which could be shared with the present moment? So I thought, why not just speak to the non-physical world directly through channelers around the world? And that's what I set out to do. They Call Us Channelers will take the viewers on a journey into the phenomena known as channeling. And my main goal with this docuseries is to bring a new understanding and awareness to channeling by looking within ourselves and asking, is it truly possible that we can all use this innate ability?
Yeah, I lived most of my adult life in California,
Yeah, when did you move away from California?
I moved away from California about three and a half years ago. Yeah. I took a road trip from California to Florida, stopped by there for a little bit. And then this was in 2019, just sold everything, my car, everything, and was like, okay, I'm gonna live like nomadically, basically. And that's what it's been like for the last almost 2 years. So
If you were to sum up what you do, how would you sum that up?
I guess the best way to sum that up, I I'm I'd say I'm a bit of like an ascension catalyst, and I help people kind of either get closer to that point, that turning point where they realize, wow, there's something greater here, or aid them in that journey while they've already sort of received the message and are looking for a little bit of guidance in that process of basically connecting with their true being.
Yeah. And if you were to sum up an important message, what would that be right now, do you think, in the work that you're doing?
I say it's trust, trust. And to be more specific, trust within, because that's sometimes the hardest thing that gets in the path. For one, we're trained to look without and to put our trust out there. But as we begin a more intentional path, it's important to put that trust within and to know whenever we're when we're sort of tempted to kind of, stray from that place of well-being, to have that trust, to say it's going to be okay.
Absolutely. And it's almost like trusting that intuition as well. That's a really important part.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And we so often ignore that intuition, don't we? Why do you think we do that for?
I think because that's how we're trained. Because, one interesting thing of channeling, especially with these energies, like they say that every being is, or at least human being, becomes domesticated when they first come into Earth. Like we come in very pure, right? No judgments, no preconceived ideas. We're just sort of present, right? Like the infant guru. But then we get trained into our families. And so we're trained to, usually is by reward and punishment. So behave this way or behave that way. And if you don't, you're punished. When you do, you're rewarded. And so when that inner voice is there, if it's not aligned with what the parent says, then we learn to we practice ignoring it, and then we're just get trained into that.
No, I totally agree with that as well. And we'll get more into the sort of, opening up to channeling and, the sort of psychic development that can take place from there as well. And, the intuition trusting as well. Obviously, what do you channel? If I was to sort of, get you to sum up that as well.
So I channel these non-physical entities that have originated in the Pleiades. I guess that's the way that they've shared their sort of who they are with me. And I'm always discovering, for me, the experience started pretty early on in my childhood through recurring dreams and imagery, but it didn't become really clear as I became older. And yeah, I'm always discovering, more myself. So.
Oh, I can tell that as well with the work that you're doing. So were you born in California then?
No, I was born in Albania. Yeah, I was born and raised there. And I left as a young teen. My family won the immigration lottery to move to the United States.
Yeah, wow, that's just incredible, isn't it? But do you think that things like that, big, life-changing things like that, just don't happen for no reason? Do you think that was sort of destined?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. That was actually the first experience that really, I think, made it so clear, that how events work when an intention is set, even beyond we're even born,
Yeah, I mean, do you ever imagine, like, opening up this gift in Albania, and would it have opened exactly like it has for you, do you think?
That's a great question. Honestly, I don't think it would have happened like this, but I remember being very young and having the same sort of, like, I don't know how to call it, but just, yeah, and like an inner intuition, an inner calling. But I think the culture there, I mean, it's still very different, but the way I grew up, it wouldn't have allowed any room for any of this. I definitely experience it. I think about it nowadays. I'm like, I wonder what it'd been like if I'd been there, or maybe if it would have all led to this moment, just in a different way,
Yeah. I mean, where were you heading? Obviously, when you got to America, you must have still been at high school, I guess.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So career path, where was it initially heading?
So I always wanted to be into healing somehow. And so the only way I knew was through medicine, modern day medicine. And actually, I became an EMT, a certified EMT. I rode with the ambulance. And when I got to college, so I became an EMT in high school. And then when I got to college, I was like, well, I really want to help people out. So I'm going to go into medicine. And I got a job at a hospital. And it just, something just felt really off, you know? And a lot of it was, I just couldn't imagine bringing healing forth, being in a hospital setting. It felt so jarring. And that's when I basically was like, this is not, I know I want to help people, just not in this way. And so I switched gears then into a more creative way, because I think I didn't realize this at the time, but, you know, to share any kind of wisdom or healing, whether you're doing energy healing or if you're a doctor, there's a certain internal and outward training. And I feel that I was sort of like calling for something, but I needed to sort of prepare myself to meet it, you know, internally.
Yeah, I mean, you know, doing that type of work, it is, you know, anyone that's in the medical field recently as well, you know, you are being of service. It's, you know, so, you know,
Absolutely.
it's helping people. You know, there's great qualities, you know, to that. But how difficult was that for you to listen within and trust it, to know that this wasn't your path? Because, you know, as you know, it's not about a career path. It's a steady sort of, you know, climb up the ladder, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah. You know, it was actually very difficult because so one thing, I was slipping really deep into depression. And part of it was because I felt in such dissonance with this inner, I felt like my inner, you know, my soul. And so, and then there were other things, you know, like I grew up in Albania when there was the fall of communism and civil war. And it was never, you know, like we were lucky to have electricity. You know, we didn't have like, you know, water was on a schedule, all these little things. And then being thrust into this brand new experience of migrating to the United States, it wasn't easy for my parents either. And so there was a lot of different things. And then I was like, oh, I'm going to let my parents down if I'm not in this serious, you know, fall off in this serious way of living that felt like really the path. And so I slipped into a depression, and I took a bunch of pills one night, and then I'm sitting there and I'm like, this is not, I don't think I meant to end my life, but it was already kind of getting late in the process where I felt like my body was starting to react. So I made a call to the suicide hotline, and I basically, and this was very difficult to sort of accept this experience, but I did end up in the hospital. And, but it was very relieving because I'd sort of hit like the rock bottom, you know, which is that place where you're like, I can't live life like this. And so, you know, in those days that I was there, in the 10 days I was there, I had to really make a choice. I was like, do I want to live? And I said, yes, but I can't live the way that I've been living so far. And it's not about what I do, but so much of being internally feeling good about the life that I'm living. And that's when I was like, okay, I think I'm ready to make this shift, you know, and accept the consequences, right? So that's a big one of adulting, right?
Oh, absolutely it is. And isn't that the thing that, you know, when your passion's calling you in a different direction, you know, for a lot of us and a lot of people watching this, initially a lifetime of it, it's difficult to head towards your passion, in a sense, of what your calling is.
Yeah, because there's different layers of ourselves that we must both face and clear up to get to that part of us that is, you know, more calm, more at peace, and just, you know, is like in a sense like flowing, right? Is not just constantly like, oh, well, who am I upsetting with this? And you know, is this the right way? Or a lot of that doubt, right? And depending on again, that training and the environment that we're in, there's sometimes for some people, it's a little bit more work. For others, it can be more easy, you know?
Yeah, and with myself living over here as well for a while now, it's very much that sort of American thinking, isn't it? That to be seen doing well, to be seen successful. Like even dating
Yes.
someone over here, it's like, I'm with a successful person and all this. Do you know what I
Right.
mean? Yeah, yeah.
Uh, yeah, absolutely. Like it's like these masks that we wear to make sure that we're being accepted by the world outside of us, right? That is such a big part of our survival, almost to a detriment, right? And it's amazing because social media is really exposing that, where people will show up one way and then later the news comes out. It's funny. Yeah. I was just gonna say I felt this, when I went to the hospital and then I came out. I remember having to go because I was living at the dorm to the dean's office to pick up my key because my apartment was locked. It was during summer break. And I remember going there and just at first being faced with so much shame about, like, oh, I was at this place, they're going to think I'm crazy. And then at some point, just accepting, what, that part of growth is sometimes losing your path, and not punishing yourself for that. It's almost like that's such a huge, huge part of evolving. It's accepting yourself wherever you are.
No, it's absolutely so true. And I think, do you think that because you came from Albania, that it was easier for you to break away from the pattern of caring what other people thought? So maybe that
Mm-hmm.
experience from being abroad was also of many benefits, but one of them was just to break free. Because sometimes it's so difficult for people over here and other countries that have the same sort of karma going on to break free of that, worrying about what others may think, especially our family.
Yeah, that's actually a great point. That's a really cool thing that you picked up on. It is true. I definitely felt one thing that was interesting in my circumstances is that all of my extended family was so far away, right? And I was only connected with them through like a phone call, right? And so in some ways it made it easier because I was already, let's say, away from, at school or whatever, that it was like, you know what? I've already left that other world behind. And you're so right. And I don't know if you're experiencing this, being in the United States
Oh,
too.
well, only a little bit.
Only-
Having had experience in relationships with an American partner, I know what the pressure's like for having to be this thing that maybe you're not truly happy being sometimes. And when you talk
Mhm.
about wanting to do your passion, it's like, well, that's not going to bring any money. And I'm not going to be responsible if I do that. But actually,
Yeah.
if you had done it, it may have not only just been happier, and that happiness
Yeah.
would have carried off so much wealth associated with it. But it's breaking the cycle, and it's for you in this lifetime to realize that.
Yeah, that's a great way of putting it. Absolutely. I'd say one thing that did help me as well was that where I came from, there was so much poverty that even just being in the United States, like a huge accomplishment. And so when it came to money, and it was more about, like in some ways, yeah, like do what makes you happy. Like that's the whole point of even experiencing something so massive like winning the lottery, right? It was like when you seek you shall receive kind of thing. And I remember I've always, but now more and more I see the power of that. And that's why I say trust, because we'll receive that or we'll hear that and we'll say, yeah, but not for me, right? But when you trust that, you can kind of like ease up a little bit, and then you start seeing the way it manifests in your life and you're like, oh my God, okay, it's happening. This is
Absolutely,
cool.
which is part of the messages that you're giving right now as well. But just sticking on this thread, right?
Yeah, yeah,
um,
yeah, yeah.
um, it's all important what you're saying here. That's not what you're not saying. Is it's not an avoidance of saying, well, I've got no more responsibilities. I'm going to start to think that way,
Right,
or
right.
I'm just going to give up my job right now. I mean, you're where
Yeah.
you're at, no matter where you're working right now, and that's not to say that you couldn't start what you'd like to do on the side. Do you know what I mean?
Exactly. Yeah. It's about, that thing of being trained, when we're trained when we're young, we're trained little by little, or like even when we learn to walk, right? We sort of take a few steps, baby takes a few steps. And then I know this has come into channeling. This was like a fun imagery for me to think about it. And then the kid falls over, they might cry, but then they get up the next day and they go again, right? And it's the same thing when we're sort of retraining ourselves to be more attuned to that inner intuition and to clear up enough of the inner noise to know what the real intuition is versus everything else that's been stored in our minds and all the other messages we're receiving. And it's funny you're saying the thing about responsibility is responsibility, because you actually, when you embrace that inner passion and that inner calling, you actually have to be even more responsible, right? Because you can't go around like, oh, I hate my job, or you're sort of like, oh, I committed to this and it is up to me to not do everything, take all the actions, but at least be within in such a state that I can trust and I can allow for those things to come in,
Yeah, the
And
universe
that's
has
not
got your
easy.
back. The universe has got your back no matter
Right.
what situation you may find yourself in, as though that, I mean, we all put ourselves in the final situation, don't we? But I
Right.
think there's always a way forward. There's always light at the end of the tunnel.
Yes.
Yeah.
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 And I think that kind of, when we begin retraining that attitude within ourselves, we start to meet different kinds of people who sort of are on that same path as well. And that starts to really shift things, because even if we might not be able to know what a certain behavior or attitude is, we start to invite people in our life and we witness them kind of living that. And it's like, oh, that's so cool. Like that person is like a living example of that. And it's very inspiring, It's like moving from motivation into inspiration, right? And that's like a nice shift experience.
It is, and there are many other lives on this planet that will maybe never experience such a thing because, they've got certain addictions to things and they're on their own path, right?
Yeah.
But it's
Yeah.
never
Yeah.
too late. You don't have to be
Right.
an addict to have an awakening. You could start your path at any time. Do you know what I mean? Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
But
We have
actually,
this concept of time.
you're on your path, really, aren't you? All the time. I'm almost like I'm saying we're bypassing something. We're not. We're where we're supposed to be.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like that thing of embracing. Yeah. First, before you make any shift, if that's what you're being called for, you gotta first embrace. It's kind of like, in AA, it's like when you go to the AA meetings, I've never been, but where have to say like, hello, I'm so-and-so, and I'm this thing. There's like this sense of like, I'm accepting where I'm at. That's the first step, because sometimes we as humans want to move towards change, but we are in such judgment of ourselves and who we are. And it can be a trap, because we're like, I want to change, but I hate this. I want to change, but, and you got to get rid of the buttons and just be like, you know what, this is where I'm at. I embrace myself and I kind of see the perfection of the imperfection, but where can I go from here,
And when you were having your dark night of the soul, right, in the sense that, you was in a hospital for an overdose, and, look, we've all done things that, we look back on and think, well, you know what, maybe I wasn't being so kind to myself back then, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
None of us are innocent of anything, and you know what, it's just an experience. But when you was going through that experience, did they almost make you feel, or did you feel, or did others think that you maybe had a mental health issue at that point?
Well, I definitely, what I was diagnosed with was depression. And I know the people around me that were sort of attentive enough could tell that, I definitely was depressed. And that was interesting to me, because I went, when you're admitted, it's really interesting, but they do sort of give you a diagnosis, and the doctor was like, okay, you have depression. And there was a part of me, like the ego part of me, that was like, that's it. That's all this drama because I'm depressed. Like, coming from Albania in such a rough environment of what my parents have been through, was like, there was a part of me that was like, oh, this is so silly, like, get it together. But then realizing like, no, this is serious. This is important, and that's the importance too of people who go through things that, of when you're going through something, to pay attention, not just ignore it, and to notice like, what is this, whatever you want to diagnose or not diagnose, this inner malaise, what is this thing? And what is it trying to tell me? And I think that's, when we let things go so far, we don't pick up on those signals, they manifest in more extreme ways. So,
well, it's like any health issues, be it, like
exactly
a body health issues, which we'll get into a little bit as well. But the reason I asked that, and I appreciate you being so honest about it, is because obviously in this field, it's very open to those who have mental health issues in this field. Actually, it's open to a lot of, I'll say, narcissism as well. There's all
absolutely
sorts of, there's all sorts of covert mental health issues that hide away in someone, and it could be a spiritual teacher that's got those covert issues, or maybe they're on the outside a bit more than covert, who knows, right? So I think any healing with mental health is an acceptance that of where you're at, and becoming self-aware of it as well, which you are, and hopefully most people are as well. But that's a difficult thing within this field, isn't it?
I agree. I think, I think of this a lot because sometimes you hear messages and you're like, this is good. Like, I can tell this person, whether they're a channeler or just a teacher, whatever it is, however the message is coming through is good and it's sincere. But there are sometimes I'll work with people who have also worked with people, and they'll say, oh, I was told to eat this or not eat that, or certain things where I'm like, well, what, where's this coming from? Like, is this working for you? But I think part of it is because that's the thing of the survival part, right? That we're such survival creatures. And if we don't do that inner work, that can really get in the way. And power is a big one, right? There's this need to control. And I think because of the power that spirituality has to deeply influence someone, it definitely is a hotbed for a lot of, exactly, people who just are like, oh, great, this is an opportunity for me to implement more of like the inner kind of control and power that I want in the world out there.
Yeah, my narcissistic covert stuff that they can't see is now going to have a supply, basically. And
exactly. And one little thing I want to add is that so many people who start on this path, like are in very vulnerable places in their lives. So you have to handle with a lot of care. So I think that's very, Well,
it just goes back to, doesn't it, that your experiences, none of them are wasted, because what you went through, you'll be able to spot that. Do you know what I mean? So nothing's wasted, is it? Absolutely nothing is.
No, absolutely. I mean, I feel like, this like, going to like the mental hospital and actually spending a good amount of time doing a lot of the inner work in different ways. I think it's, I always tell people, like, because they're like, oh, were you changed since you started channeling? Actually, just a friend was asking that. And I said, yeah, but then as I was reflecting on it, I was like, you know what? But it didn't start coming through until I cleared up enough inner crap for it to come through, right? And I think that's something sometimes difficult to share with people because the culture is so much like, I want to take a magic pill. What if I started doing this and all of a sudden I'm changed by it? And it's like, honestly, it's a daily practice and it takes a long time to get to a place, depending how much inner work inner noise you got to clear up to get to a place where you're like, all right, this is like, there is a sense of sincere clarity coming through, No, I was going to say that sometimes like going through more stuff, it allows you to kind of do that work and to really delve into yourself. Otherwise, like you can't get up from bed in the morning, right? So, I think that's a big one. When you have to like pay more attention, you have to, practice more so you can't sort of wing it as much, like.
Yeah, and we're all
Yeah.
responsible for our own development. And if you want to be
Yes,
and who we
absolutely.
associate with as well. And you just got to
Yeah.
be very careful that you're not leading yourself down a dark path of self-destruction, because, if that's what you want to experience, fine. But it doesn't have to be that
Yeah.
way. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think part of it is, again, because we become so trained to feel a certain way, to act a certain way, that sometimes even when someone gets on a spiritual path, they'll sort of be like, oh, that's kind of resembles most where I'm coming from. So that's what I'm gonna move towards, you know. Uh
And I think it's okay
yeah.
as well, isn't it? Just to be open with your audience that, you're going through your own stuff as well. There's no escapism just because you're doing the work.
Oh yeah, absolutely. That's the great thing about being on this path is that there's no like I feel like I can't channel unless I am cleared up. Like, I'll give you a little example. I think we have talked about this when I was in Belarus, and it was a very stressful situation. And it wasn't so easy for me to channel because I noticed so much fear come up, right? And I had to, within, really like catalyze this fear and do the inner work. Otherwise, it was like massive walls around me. It's not, I don't know. I guess it's not something I can't imagine. I'm sure some people could do it, but I'm like, I can't imagine doing that being in a certain state. So it's like I have to, yeah, go through it myself in order to allow it to come through.
No, I absolutely get that. And how have your friends back in your sort of home country taken the work that you're doing now?
It's the neat part is so I have two best friends that I grew up with. We were friends from like 3, 4 years old. They're a brother and sister, about a year apart, so we're about the same age. And now that we're adults, it makes sense to me how we connected when we were very young because they're both very, very sensitive. And out of everybody I know, they're sort of like the only ones that just really not just get what I do, but they're into it. And they're like, oh, this is so great. Like I'm totally vibing with this. But other people that are more, from family, they're just sort of, it's very strange to them. Like it's not,
Yeah.
you
Well,
know.
do you think that's because, right? And I'm going to put these words in your mouth. You can tell me what you think.
Yeah.
But do you think, I mean, yes, channeling's been around in the past, but do you think that the sort of channeling now is the evolution of the next sort of psychic phenomena in a sense?
Hmm. That's really interesting. Yeah. You know, yeah, I guess you could put those words in my mouth. Yes, I would say that's actually a really cool way of putting it.
Maybe we can
Yeah.
ask your guys when they come through as well, that question.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. It's fun to think about because what's really interesting to me, I grew up in Albania when I was born, and it was still communist. Albania was the ultimate out of all the history of countries, like it achieved ultimate atheism, right? No belief in God or religion. As a matter of fact, I grew up watching movies where they would mock priests and I don't know how to say this word in English, but the because Albania is a mix of Islamic and Catholic and Orthodox. So basically, anybody who was in a spiritual practice was it was mocked and it was illegal. Like the churches were closed and stuff. So I find it very interesting, and that's why I think it's not just about what's happening, let's say, in the Western world, but overall is the evolution of, of spiritual practice. It's really, really interesting. Yeah, I guess I haven't thought about it that much, but I definitely thought about how it's so fascinating that, I mean, there are still parts of the world where religion is not allowed, but overall there is an expansion because I see it in Albania as well now. Like I see, they have yoga classes and they're Reiki classes. I'm like, this is amazing for a country where, it was so like you couldn't practice anything. It's like It's really
Interesting.
incredible.
That's
Yeah, yeah,
interesting. So obviously, there's a lot of medium psychics and other, people with abilities out there, whether it's numerology, astrology, it's all tapping into that psychic side as well. And,
yeah.
I think, well, or do you think that they come as a package when you start channeling? Like, when you do start the channeling practice, that you open up all those parts, and would that be true, do you think?
Yeah, I well, what I sense is that we all have different gifts, and when the channeling comes through, it filters in a way through those gifts, right? Like some people have the gift where they understand. Like I've a friend of mine who does sound healing, which was an incredible part of my healing process as well, and she just picks up sound. It's like, she can pick up all these details and things and rhythm and the flow of that rhythm. Some people are much like you're saying, or like, tarot card reading, right? Like, or numerology. Um, and I think part of when we channel is that these abilities heightened, and depending if we don't force it, or and we allow it to be, they come through in whatever sort of gift we carry, right? That we come into this world. So I feel like when you do open to channeling and allowing the energies to come through, I feel like they sort of I don't know if like everything about it opens up. It really depends on the person, um, because sometimes, I talk to people and they say, I want to channel, but I'm not as gifted with words. And because they think that channeling only comes through with, words, right? But words are just verbal, right? But that's just one way of communication.
Well, there's the automatic writing, isn't there? That's
Exactly.
another
Yeah.
way of doing it. There's even the use of it just to communicate to your higher self as well. And or do
Right.
you agree
Right.
with that? And what is the difference between the higher self and the soul, do you think?
You know, that's interesting. I've thought about this, or sort of asked about this, about the higher self and the soul. And the soul is that part of us that is always in that state of expansion, like in a way, like a best friend, right? And the higher self is that source aspect of us that is kind of has direct access to, greater consciousness. And I think it's almost like there's no, I guess, like, yeah, real like separation. Is just a sense of flow of how the energy flows. So there's like the physical body, then there's the physical mind, and then there's the heart, and then there's the soul and the higher self and source. And yeah.
Yeah, it's almost like the way you're describing that is that the higher self is the presence for this life of the sort of doorkeeper maybe to the soul. But then again, I might be saying that. I mean, this is just my take on it. What do I know? Yeah.
Yeah, I think with all these things, it's the same thing as channeling. I always say, if it feels good and it's leading you towards a really awesome path, whatever you call it, enjoy it.
Absolutely. And, I
So,
mean, I think, when we talk about the evolution of channeling, I think a lot of, psychics and mediums and other people, probably would say, they are channeling when they do that practice, and that,
right.
channeling could actually be an extra practice for, others in the field as well, and an extra add-on.
Yeah, I think, it's interesting because channeling, it's like it's an art. And I feel that when a surgeon is in the surgery room and gets in the zone, that's why, they often put on music, like they're channeling, because it's not just what they learned in school. It's not just their ability to, I don't know, cut straight lines or do certain things. It really is something even greater that takes over, right? Same thing with an athlete. But again, it comes with practice. And it's the same thing with channeling and or music, right? But it's the same thing with spiritual channeling. It's that, or however it manifests. But I do believe that channeling is, and that's what I love about channeling, people becoming more exposed to it, to see that, hey, it's an event of normal life. Like, it's a powerful event of normal life. It's when we get into that flow state, you're channeling, because you're opening up those, like we were talking, like your soul opens up. Like, first of all, it's like your body opens up, your mind, your heart, and then your soul, your higher being and source. And it's just like this kind of filter that comes through. And it's really amazing. And I think if more of us, like if channeling was more of like a thing that we sort of become aware of as young kids, like more people can kind of tap into that. Like, what is this state where I'm allowing energy to flow through? What does it like show up in my life? What am I being called for?
Exactly. And so I could say back to you that, channeling is the ability to open up it's like a funnel. You're just increasing that funnel larger to allow that some aspect of that greater part of you through, the soul part through, the higher self through. Yeah,
exactly. And it's like one way when I channel that the information comes through that is sort of shared, and I like this, is that, we channel light, all of us, but our perception sort of filters that light, right? So the goal is, throughout our daily experiences, how to clear up more and more of that perception, so when the light comes through, it's much more powerful and clear, right? And so it's in the same way, and I like to use sometimes examples outside of, like, let's say, channeling and spirituality, because sometimes, it's like kind of showing to people that it's not this abnormal, weird woo-woo thing. It's something that's happening every day. But it's the same way, for example, like, let's say an athlete, they have an intuition, right, about playing something that they enjoy doing. But if they want to become like the best sort of player, they train every day how to sort of clear up all their little bad habits. And the bad habits could just be simple things like, waking up for practice and drinking enough water and stretching, right? And it's the same thing with, with spiritual, like, channeling. It's just, a lot of it is that practice of like, oh, like, am I, waking up in a state of gratitude? Am I willing to observe myself, even if I'm being an asshole? Am I really present with someone? And when I'm sharing, like, this is a big one, with someone who's seeking, some kind of aid or guidance, am I really present with them and allowing the full message to come through? Or is part of my ego trying to control or project whatever I'm going through, all these little things, without getting too crazy about it.
It's difficult.
Yeah, so,
it's difficult. And you'll find, probably, like you say, a lot of athletes, a lot of, boxers, for example, or whatever, you're into. Yeah, it's clearing that up. But when we do employ it, and again, it could just be your voice in your head back to you. It doesn't have to be the seven. Exactly. It doesn't have to be Bashar. Right. It doesn't have to be any of these things, right? Right. Even if it's just your voice coming back to you in a private moment while you're practicing, right? It is a way to improve your life and to become your better version.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. It's simplifying that. It's interesting because we often give, meaning where there's no meaning. We do all these things and sometimes it's just, hey, if it's working, good. Like,
yeah, and okay. It could open you up to maybe spirit guides coming through, or some sort of guide, which I'm sure it did. Did it do that for you, maybe?
Yeah, I definitely notice more. The more I open up, different energies that come forth, that I sort of like, oh, I don't know about this. Like, I didn't grow up with this. Like, this is not part of my, frame of reality. And it's like, oh, but this is kind of cool. It's expanding my internal horizons, so to speak.
And even if you feel that like you're making it up, because we all say that, don't we? It is still interesting, even if it's coming from the higher self and not even beyond that level, which is still a good state to be in, the higher self communication. It's amazing what wisdom lies within that is buried within our DNA.
Yes, that's a great way of putting it. I think a big part of it is this practice of getting yourself out of the way and seeing what comes forth, no matter what you might call it. Because I think it's a really nice way of that's that trust thing, because a lot of channeling too is like getting out of the way and saying, you know what, I don't know what's going to come through. It might be completely ridiculous.
Well, it may be, for some people, it may be a seeing of the future. It may be
Right.
almost like mind-to-mind communication. You just know what someone's going to say. It starts off in weird ways, doesn't it, when you open?
Yes, yeah, it's really, I think it's very, sometimes it's like beyond our understanding. I feel like we're still like, we're advancing our technology, but I think, and we have a lot of amazing spiritual technology, but I think because it's in the practice, I feel like we're still discovering so much as humans.
Yeah, and how do we keep it grounded? Because there's a lot of I could use the words woo woo. People hate when it becomes so out there. Um,
Yeah.
but when you open yourself up like that, you're opening yourself up to all sorts of energies out there that have their own understanding of where they're at, right? Maybe not
Yeah.
yours. How do you ever think about how you can, do you keep what you do grounded, and how do you go about doing that so it's not, it's not putting everyone off in a sense?
That's interesting. I guess the way I see it in my personal life is like, is this practical? Like, is this helping me grow? And is this allowing me to gain a better understanding of myself and the world around there? And I noticed that sometimes, I do these live Q&A, channeled Q&As, and I'll watch them back. And sometimes people ask such questions, and in my head, it's a good thing I sort of get that out of the way, where I'm like, this question is not helping you become a better person. But at the same time, it's like, you know what? That's part of their reality. But then I guess, what I appreciate about the energy that comes through, and maybe it's because of the way that I'm filtering it, that it's focused on kind of putting things in a perspective that is, practical on a day-to-day basis, and not just like, we all have different stories we tell and things that sometimes are just purely entertaining. But I think sometimes people take so seriously that it distracts them from the real work of, like, the way I see it is like, like a family, right? Like when you are part of a family, like if you're, present and you live in a certain way, you can really be a true gift to the family unit. And so, but if you're sort of not, you can make your own life and the lives of other people complete hell. And so the way I see this more intentional journey, and even channeling, is is it helping you become a more joyful, well-adjusted person? Or is it just continuing to feed that inner whatever thing is that is keeping you from feeling like that? And I don't think all of what happens in channeling or spiritual practices is all about helping you sort of be a more, just chill, happy person, right? Some of it is to sort of, I think it can be too, I don't know, like, it wraps people up more in their heads than anything. So.
We almost have to, in this work, to become teachers in our own discernment of what we're bringing through as well. And people
Yes, yeah.
receiving this information have to be discerning. And of course, they're not, some people. And that's not a judgment.
Right. No. Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. 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 Everybody has to. And also, it's like different messages for different points in our lives. That's part of it as well.
I think so. I think so. And even if none of this was true, just say that, when we die, and that's it, it's over, right?
Right.
And it's difficult to think about that in a universe which is infinite and has always been and always will be. And, goes back to a potential Big Bang. And before that, there may have been something. And now there's discoveries of, alternative universes and parallel universes, I guess is what I'm saying. But even in all that majestic, foreverness, if there was nothing, I think as well, part of this work as well is if it helps you to become a better person, as you kept saying, and I agree with you. Well, if as long as what you're doing is not purposefully hurting anyone, what's the harm? And others would say, well, you're giving people false hopes and all this. No, it's another way of almost like a self-help guru in a sense. Do you know what I mean? Be your best.
Exactly. Yeah. It's interesting because we have a way of passing judgment in the world where, if you look at, governments, corporations, certain companies, like they do certain things right under our noses and we accept it because, it's a registered LLC and they're producing this much money, there's a different way of, but then if somebody comes along and, you never heard of what they do or it's weird, there's like, oh, okay, sure, even though there might be something valuable there.
No, absolutely. And I should just say, what's your website as well? Because it's been coming up on the screen.
Yeah, so my website is ascension7.org and I'm just rebuilding it now. So going to be up in a few weeks, yeah.
And I want people as well to go to your YouTube channel and check out some of the great videos that you've done there as well. And we'll link the YouTube channel below. The YouTube channel name is?
Charlie Wilde 7.
Okay, so that's all in the description. If you just go below the video, there's a little tab just underneath with all the links to this as well. Just going into your YouTube channel as well, you do some interesting videos. How do you tell what video you're going to do? Is it just sort of what you feel like would be, helpful to others and so fun to make for yourself?
Yeah, it is a lot like basically, intuitively approaching it intuitively. And it's often also based on the questions I receive. I guess it's a combination of both. One thing I've been doing a lot recently is the channeled Q&A. And that's been fun because then people get to sort of, ask questions and it's like a fun way of sort of really connecting. I guess that's my favorite part of YouTube is the ability to connect with other people who are also curious to learn more and are want to explore further and are interested in channeling and are interested in discovering more, because I definitely learn because, it's like a lot of the channeling comes through, obviously through questions that people ask. So it's really fun to see like, oh, like what comes through when this question is asked, I never thought to ask this, I never thought to ask that. Like, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, well, that's the great thing about, doing the live stream like you're doing. And, people can go in there and, like you say, ask and interact with yourselves. And folks can ask most things, can't they?
Yeah, they can ask anything, basically. And people do. And that's the fun part because, I also think what's interesting to me, because I never judged, again, like channeling was a very... it's not something I was aware that it existed, even though it was something that, I had such powerful experiences growing up and it continued on. And it wasn't until a friend introduced me to like, okay, I think this thing you're doing is called channeling. I'm like, okay, I'm not just a crazy person. Like there's other people who sort of practice this thing, whatever, it's called, and so I definitely, when I started sort of asking, like, what is this energy, and the Pleiadian thing kept coming up, like, I never had any idea about the Pleiades or the Pleiadian messages that have come forth in the past. And what's interesting is that sometimes when people come to me and they say, oh, you channel the Pleiadians, like they'll ask certain things that they, through their experience or through previous messages they've heard the Pleiadians will talk about. And so, but I always say that, every channeler is a filter. So whatever energy is coming through, they're going to filter it. And I know that's why it's so important, I say with myself, to practice living a certain way, because that's what's going to determine how the messages are filtered.
And maybe you're doing it the way you're doing it right now because, you're still working on that. Like we all would be in your position. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. And that's why I'm always open to, because I say the more I practice getting out of the way, it's gonna, the message is going to sort of have its own evolution. Not just the message, but, how the energy is coming through, and accepting that. It's like, I'm not, this is not, it's like anything. We're always in a state of evolution,
How has it affected you in the sense of day-to-day living, day-to-day stresses, day-to-day issues that you have? Human life is not always straightforward, is it? And
No.
yeah.
It's really cool because it's whenever things do come up, I do take the time to and like sit and like, what would seven say? Like, what would be their guidance? And sometimes when the guidance comes through, it's cool. Like sometimes it annoys me because I'm like, that's not what I want to do, but sometimes it's like, oh, this is like so cool. Like this is a nice little variant to my way of doing things so far. So overall, it's really helped. And, a big part of it too, it's like coming out of the closet when you share it with other people, because it is a different thing. It's, it's different. So when you have the ability to say, you know what, I'm going to embrace it. It's different. It's out there, but I'm going to share it. It really is it's again, like opening that channel of communication deeper.
And you don't always, when you do ask for advice, you don't always have to, you never have to do anything that's another person's truth, even if it's what you've channeled. And I guess there are some times where you think to yourself, well, what would they say? You know what? I'm going to, do whatever I want to do. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's something that I like about the channeling, because really all it is again, it's like an art, there is, to some degree, you're witnessing it, but it's not like it's not like this thing of like, you have to do this, this, and this, and if you don't do it, you'll get punished. It's like, hey, this is the perspective of reality that, another one, or existence.
Well, I guess right. They're always there to pick up the pieces. Do you know what I mean? Because look,
yeah, yeah.
I don't think there's anything that's really off path. Sometimes I think it's all just like, you know what, you can't change anything, and you can only try to do better next time. But
Yes.
they're always there, aren't they? No matter how low you've gone.
Yeah, I think that's the beauty of anyone and everyone learning to reconnect with this aspect of them, whatever that is, whatever you call it. But just this, it's like that connection to source, where you just know it's going to be all right. Just that basic truth, right? That you're always supported, right? That's a big one, right? Just be like, hey, yeah.
No, that's so true. What I was going to say there as well is the way showers. There's been a lot of I was on and I'm not trying to name drop other people in your conversation here, but look, let's face it, all the channelers that are out there now, and those that are older than us, have shown the way of what's possible, right? I was on a Theo conference a few weeks ago, maybe a week ago, and to see over 200 people on that conference call in video, and to see the teaching that Theo was doing, and Marcus and Sheila channels Theo, an Archangel group, and I was thinking, how many years have they been doing this, and how many people have they helped? And they've set the stage, a lot of these people, for someone like yourself.
Yeah. That's really beautiful. Thank you for sharing that, because I agree. And one thing that I do love about, we were speaking about United States, like I do love here, at least up until now, we've gotten a lot of freedom to explore, and I really, really, really appreciate that. I think it's such a precious aspect of, even though there's all these structures in Western society, there's still so much room to, for these things to develop and to have an audience. I think it's really, really, like, I'm forever grateful for that.
Well, where would you like to go with what you're doing? Let me ask you that. And on top of that, I also want to ask, if you can remember this, and if you can't, just ask me, why is it that you're traveling so much now? What are you looking for?
It's so funny, actually. So the other day I was kind of sharing this with my friend. I was telling her about, because I'm in Fort Myers, and she said, would you ever have thought that you'd end up, in Fort Myers? And I thought, you know what? I'm not surprised at all. And I noticed some of the best experiences that I have are through traveling, because sometimes we become so comfortable in the places that we are, that when I travel, whether it's, in US or outside, I'm always in, new coordinates, new language, new culture. And I really love that, because it's a real practice in like maintaining your sort of who you are and your core and your right state, no matter where you land or what things come up. And I really love I guess right now in my life, the adventure of traveling, because I get to have experiences that are so unique. And I think part of that was also driven by the fact that, growing up in Albania, we couldn't really travel when I was growing up there. It was like the passport basically had no value. You couldn't leave to go anywhere because everybody thought you'd just stay in this place. And so I always would dream about traveling. And I think that definitely has something to do with it. It's like, having a certain freedom and saying, great, I'm going to put it into practice. And it's paid off.
It's interesting, isn't it? 'Cause, going back to the first part of the question, it's like, thank you for that, by the way, as well. It's like, where would you like to see yourself? That's kind of what I was asking as well. On top of
right.
that.
Yeah, exactly. So I'd love to continue sharing the messages and truly, for myself, practicing living a certain way, and really, sharing the messages through, I guess, living them, and it's, and connecting with people all over the globe. That's just been really, really awesome. I call it cosmic family, because in a way, we have our blood families, and sometimes they don't often feel like families. So, sometimes you make these connections, out there with people that you're like, wow, we really connect in this beyond our conditioned personalities, and so that's a really wonderful experience.
There's a reason why you're doing the traveling, and I'm sure it's to do with your future as well. I'm sure it is, with not with everything.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think there's always like a bigger picture. Sometimes we don't see it, or maybe sometimes it's not the time to see it, but then you look back and you're like, oh, okay, I'm glad I trusted.
Absolutely. And I think, there's so much we could talk about here. And I
Yes.
know I want to just do a little bit of channeling with you as
All right.
well.
Okay, cool.
So just talk about the process as well of how you connect.
All right. So I guess my process is pretty simple. A big part of channeling for me, I realize, is relaxation. As long as I'm relaxed, and practicing deep breathing, that's been a huge, huge thing, actually. That's been incredibly healing for my body as well. And then practicing getting out of the way, Yeah, exactly. And but I noticed, one thing that kind of hit me the other day is that before I used to have so much more of I think we all have a certain degree of like, oh, things have to be this way, or if like, I'm so much more aware of when my ego wants to sort of kick in and try to like be upset about something that there's really no reason to be upset about, angry or fearful. And then it's become easier to sort of sit back and be like, oh, okay, okay, but not getting like kind of like caught up in it. And a lot of it is so exact, but it is so much more like interactions with people. They're so much easier, you know.
Oh yes, no, in that perspective, yeah. It really is. And you just mentioned something there as well, which just, I shouldn't be mentioning because we should be getting on with the channeling, but the healing as well. I just think it's important to mention this, that, you know, and you give me your take. And I feel after so many
Yeah.
interviews and my own experience as well, that any issues that we've got health wise are normally, well, can be self-generated, but it's also on top of that, it's the body's way of helping us face something maybe that we don't want to face, or if it's not, it has a direct effect of that.
Absolutely. Yeah. You know, it's really interesting going back to what you were saying about when you begin channeling, it opens so many things for you. I feel like one thing for some healers, like really have a gift with this of basically reading the energy in the body and kind of pinpointing how it ties to something deeper, you know. Absolutely. There's definitely yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're a constant, see, one thing about channeling is really, it's a communication, right? And we're in a constant state of communication. One thing that's come through the channeling is they say that most humans don't really think, or what they think is thinking is just a lot of self-criticism and negative self-talk and rehashing the past. Like same thing with listening, you know. It's a real skill, like, or it's like a real spiritual practice, so to speak, right? So in the same way, mastering that kind of communication with ourselves and our bodies, you know, instead of like, you know, the automatic things that we do or say or sort of feel when we receive messages, like beginning to shift that a little bit, you know. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think as well, as you said, with the healing, I do think that there is something healing about practicing it as well. Like any practice, maybe even if it's you don't want to term it channeling. I think everything's channeled, but that's just me, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I've got
Yeah, I agree.
channeling.com. What can I say, right? you but I still think that it is a way of also healing.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
But then
Yeah.
saying that, Edgar Casey, was a full-time smoker, but then I'm sure, and I've again just quit smoking again, but I'm sure that he was told by his guys actually that what you're doing is not great for you. But my point is, I guess that just goes to show you're still in charge, aren't you? But it is
Yeah.
healing. That's my point, right?
Yeah. You know, it's funny you say this because sometimes I have this conversation with people where, you know, like, for example, there's like this side where, like, you know, with spirituality, like you eat vegan and you drink green juices. And the thing is, and then versus there's people who eat fast food and whatever, but they're still like, they're pretty dialed in, so to speak, really tuned up, right? And it's that thing where, you know, just because you're receiving the messages and all that doesn't mean that all of a sudden now you're this Puritan with your diet and all that. Like, you know, Alan Watts, an incredible channeler as well. I think he was like an alcoholic, not to say that, you know, you gotta, but the thing is, sometimes you know, yeah, I mean, it's like, again, I do see it
See,
as like an art, and it doesn't mean that, you know, you have to be this perfect
hey,
being to, you know.
absolutely, anyone can practice this ability, and I think you when you come here to this level to have an experience on planet Earth, if that's what we're doing, right? But when you coming from that perspective that we are, right? Absolutely, as long as you're not hurting anyone or yourself and you're enjoying what you're doing, continue it until you want to, choose to do something else.
Yeah, you know, it's huge, like the judgment part. One of the first things when I work with people is this is what we address, like the inner judge and how it plays out inside our heads. And this is something that's aided me in the channeling, because this is some of the teachings that sort of come through about this judgment. And a lot of it is, first it starts within, we're trained sort of into it. And then we kind of that becomes the inner talk, and that becomes the way we act with ourselves. And then that becomes the way we teach others how to act with us. And so sometimes, I think all the things, whether it's whatever those things are that we do that aren't so great for us, in a lot of ways, when that moment does come, like the dark night of the soul, it's truly like the calling to pay attention, and paying attention just means like, hey, are you like experiencing yourself like your soul, your higher being would want you to experience yourself? And there's, no judgment from source, right, about how you live your life. The judgment comes from without. And as you begin to sort of clear that judgment for yourself, it begins to shift the outer world. And I think we have so much judgment inside of us that it just becomes the norm. Then we look out there, it kind of takes the attention off of us. Look at them.
And also do it for yourself as well. That's important, right? So why don't I stop talking, right? But it's been very fun to have the conversation. Just before you go down as well, if people want a reading with yourself, they do that through your website.
Right now, that's what I'm implementing on the website, so they can do it through there.
Perfect.
And they can also email me at charliekwilde@gmail.com, but making it so that this is simple through the website. So yeah.
Okay, we'll put those links in there. So I will just thank you for this, and I'll let you go down.
All right, cool. It is good to be here with you today. We are very much delighted to share these moments and to have a conversation with you.
Excellent. Have we ever spoken before in any other sort of, I want to say way, but I'll use that way. I'll use that word for now.
All right. So sometimes humans ask us, so something is speaking with me, through me. Can you tell us who it is? And coming from a non-physical perspective, there is very little separation between all the different energies that you experience here in physical form. So in some ways, you could say that we are always speaking with you. And you are listening whenever you are open to listening.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. I appreciate it. I'm actually just going to ask you as well, has Charlie been doing this in other lifetimes as well?
All right. So non-physical energy, spirit energy, is always present in any physical form. And so anytime that a human is alive, whether they are doing a certain job or not, this energy is always there and is always communicating, all right? And so in many ways, you could say yes. And in many ways, you could say that every single one of you has been in communication with these messages, with this way of playing with the non-physical world.
So Charlie calls you a sort of a Palladian type energy, but is that just her understanding of what this is, or are you something more? But that's that's only as we evolve, then we would be able to understand it at a sort of deeper level in a sense.
All right, very good. So when Charlie began to communicate with us, she was looking for some sort of signal of who and what we were. And sometimes we notice that some humans, they like to sort of identify things because without it, they find it difficult to sort of exist in their physical reality. They say, I've got to give it a name, because without a name, then what the hell is it? You do it with one another. You've all been given names when you are born. So when we began to communicate with Charlie, we began to send her some different messages. And part of what we sent her was a sort of collection of symbols that would direct her towards a part of the cosmos that is an originating place for this energy. All right. And it is not simply an energy that is present here on planet Earth, but it is particularly an energy that has affected the evolution of the human as you know it. All right.
Yeah, that's interesting. There's just the idea that different parts of the as I call it infinite, you call it the cosmos. There's different energies, and I guess that exists throughout our universe. There's different levels of consciousness. Then I guess.
Yes, there are different levels of consciousness. There are different levels of experiences, and there are different ways in which energy manifests into a physical form.
Right. So as we increase our understanding of as humankind of potentials of what's out there, then maybe in time to come we'll be connecting with something beyond this energy that I'm speaking to now.
Yeah. So the way that we have talked about this before is that communication and non-physical happens through vibration. All right. Sometimes you experience this in the physical form. The more sensible and sensitive that you become to vibration, the more that you find yourself communicating more sort of attentively, more specifically through your vibration, not just simply through words. And so as your vibration shifts, the language that you are able to speak begins to shift. All right. So for example, when you are traveling to a place or coming in contact with someone and you do not speak their language, it's sort of a bit more difficult to understand what they are saying, all right? And when the conversation is simple enough, you can sort of get by it with gestures and looks, all right? You can convey a little bit by getting more in tune to the vibration that you are sharing. So it is in the same way as someone begins to shift their vibration, what they come into communication with begins to shift. And it is in the same way as human and collective human vibration begins to shift, what humans will be able to communicate with will also shift, all right? And what they'll be able to witness will also begin to shift.
And almost manifest into this reality as well. Yeah. Yeah. It's almost like, speaking to yourself and just thinking of some of the analogies that you're giving, right? It's almost like, the universe is like a mirror to the mind of God. Do you know what I mean? Our mind at a larger level.
Very good.
Yeah.
Yes, very good. Yes.
Yeah. In a physical form. But then again, is it? I mean, what do we really understand about what this is? But then again, is all that just bypassing to not want to have this pinprick of an experience right now? Do you know what I mean? And make the best of it.
All right. So one fun thing about the human consciousness, all right, that can also be sort of tricky for you humans is that you have been gifted with the possibility of understanding so much more of your physical environment. So the animals in your world, it's much simpler for them, all right? And they usually have a much better time and much more fun sort of existing on this planet because their existence is much simpler. And so when humans become conscious, so to speak, and they understand that there is so much more to their experience, they sort of begin to ask why, all right? Why and what and how is it working? And so in that, the truth becomes visible, but it only becomes visible when humans sort of practice releasing a lot of these ideas and thoughts that hold them apart from a greater perspective. And what we mean is that sometimes the experience is all there is, that sometimes there's not much more, not much less to it. And so learning to sort of tune yourself up to the beingness in that experience, it sort of gives you that relief from trying to determine it, what it is and what it is not.
And to want it to be different, knowing that we can manifest it different, but to not, as I've had conscious conversations with Charlie that, wanting to escape from where we're at right now as well. And to know where we're at is where we're at, and it's not going to last for long, but it's perfect as well.
Yes, it is about witnessing that. All right, so we'll put it this way. Sometimes humans will say, I am not feeling very much at peace with humanity. I'm not feeling very much at peace with what is happening on planet Earth. I'm not feeling very much at peace with myself, truly. So what can I do about it? And we say that you cannot do anything about it if you are feeling any sort of pity for what there is. You can only simply forge forth any kind of transformation when you have a sense of sort of appreciation for all that is, all right? Because see, source does not have any sort of judgment for what is about good or bad, which is why you humans can get to sort of do anything that you truly want, whether it is good or bad. Now, this can be sort of very upsetting for some humans because they say, well, why do those people do that? And how come they still get what they want? All right. And so they've sort of created different ideas of how source works, and sort of they've kind of shared with each other ways of, if you do this, then you'll be punished. All right. And there is some sort of relief and order that you have in your physical world by doing that. But in the non-physical realm and the way in which source functions is there is no judgment. All right. There's no judgment. So when you release that sort of judgment about your experience, you begin to see the perfection of all that is, that everything is exactly as it should be, all right? And it is only from that place that humans can begin to find a sense of sort of new vision and a new light, not just for the world, but truly for their own experience, all right? It's in those moments that that sort of inner being perspective begins to come forth. But this is difficult for humans to let go of, all right?
Yeah, it is. And it's the fun you can have in that as well. I mean, just because saying, everything's where it needs to be does not stop us from wanting to point out what we feel maybe, is another way of looking at it, or to show some discernment in something, or, it doesn't, we have to carry on like we are right now. For example, if someone's been involved in a killing, right? I always go back to the most negative, but let's just and you're more open to the idea that they've gone back home to where we've come from, that there's no punishment, but on this level, you still want some sort of reprimand, in the sense that not justice then, but maybe you wouldn't want a system where that person just gets to do that again. Do you know what I mean?
Yes. All right. So here's the way we're going to put it. So you have come into this physical reality to experience exactly what it is that you are experiencing. And in that, you've sort of made a choice to play in this sort of game, all right, of this physical reality. And as you go through it, there is a sense of understanding that you begin to have, all right, that your inner being has. So even the person who does something sort of very vile and destructive in your physical reality, they are never doing it because they will gain some sort of pleasure from it. They are simply doing it because they are feeling a true disconnection from their inner higher being. All right. And so the true punishment is the dissonance that they feel within. All right. But to the world out there, what they witness is sort of the crime. All right. And the consequences of that action. And so in the physical reality, you have set up ways to sort of judge this world. And it allows you to create a way and a society and places where you can sort of continue on. All right. So when we come forth, all that we bring about is sort of an awareness that when you become more tuned up to this inner way of being that is more aligned with that of your higher self and source, that more and more of those sort of dissonance and separation that manifests itself begins to not just simply dissipate, but the awareness of any single being begins to magnify to the point where they do not need to sort of act out in a particular way, because there's no need for them to reach for this way of being to find any sort of connection. All right.
Yeah, and you think about, coming from that space as someone that's gone through a crime, to say that right. If you came from that space, that it would dissipate, because over the years, maybe, or over a short amount of time, no matter however long it takes, time's not relative, is it, in a sense? But there's maybe forgiveness that comes towards that other person. Not everyone's going to experience that. It depends where they're at a soul level. But there's all sorts of things that dissipate that energy, and of course the person that's done that thing is also dissipating their energy, because they come to some sort of self-realization as well. So, but isn't it just amazing that how having this experience here allows us to have these interactions like that. I guess what my point is as well is that we need this structure the way it is right now, don't we? Or do we?
All right. So the way in which things are has evolved from the level of consciousness in which humans have been practicing. All right. And so, yes, there's perfection to all that is. And that is why, and if any kind of master that has come forth has brought about a perspective from the inside out, all right? Because there's so much that you can do and provide from the outer world, all right? There's so much you can teach someone about not to kill someone or not to hurt someone else. But when humans begin to embrace more and more of this inner practice of connection, of union, that structure without begins to shift, all right? And so right now you have created precisely the world that is necessary for you to live where you are. And that is why all throughout humanity, and right now you are feeling it, is this sort of greater desire to bring forth something new, something that feels a little bit better, that allows for more compassion, all right? And it is always for many humans a few steps forward and many steps back, because as soon as someone brings forth an idea, the ego mind must challenge it, all right? And in this challenge, more truth comes forth, all right? But it is up to every single one of you to sort of discern what is truth and what is not. And so whenever we come forth and we bring anything forth, we make it so much about you, all right? Because it is up to every single being to sort of connect deeply enough with oneself, because, and by oneself, we mean that you have access to something greater than just you. And in that process, you find a little bit more alignment, and a little bit of that sort of manifests forth in your physical reality, and a little bit more, and a little bit more, and a little bit more. And as more and more of that happens, so much more of that comes to manifest in the world without.
Thank you for that. That's really powerful, and I guess that's why some of us feel just so drawn to, want to change some of the structures that are out there right now by just doing our little thing. Maybe it's a talk, podcast. Maybe it's your some movement, or whatever it may be. Maybe it's just the job that you're doing, right? And yeah.
Yeah, it's very good, because see, sometimes humans believe that they have to do something quite big to create a transformation. Sometimes they believe that they have to do a certain action or a certain profession. But you've witnessed in your physical reality already that it is not about the particular thing that you do, but it is more about the energy that is being sort of, the energy that you are tapping into and sharing forth, all right? Because it is a vibrational universe. And oftentimes humans will say, but if I do enough of the right thing, but that's only going to carry you so far. And as more and more humans begin to practice from this eternal way of saying, you know what, I know this isn't a huge thing, but it feels good to me, then the transformation that is brought forth is way more powerful, right?
Absolutely. And just shifting subjects, and thank you for that as well, right? With the limited time that we've just got this conversation with, relationships, let's just go there. There's been a lot of shift in people's, not everyone's, but a lot of relationships just recently. Is that because we're obviously heading towards there's change about, isn't there? There's change at a larger energy level than there has been before.
All right. So this is a fun subject because relationships with humans between humans is sort of the most difficult subjects, all right? Because one way in which humans, you have been trained is very much to practice being in a way that keeps you in sort of harmony with the people that are providing for you in the physical sense, all right? And so many of you will grow up to sort of look out there and to make sure that the version of who you are and of reality is sort of being confirmed. So you continue on to bring about relationships and to do things from a place of wanting to make others feel good. And sometimes you'll do this at the sacrifice of your own well-being. And so what some humans are realizing is the energy is shifting up and is speeding up, is that if they continue to do that, it will not bring them anywhere good, all right? And so there is a great sense of relief that some humans are beginning to feel, all right? And sometimes with relief comes this sort of releasing yourself from this prison of thinking that you've got to be a certain way or behave a certain way or please others in order to be accepted and loved. There is a sense of greater worth that some, but not all, are opening up to, all right? Because of the energy and the way in which it is shifting, so many more humans are becoming aware of choice, all right? So many more humans are becoming aware that they are free beings, and that the only way that you can experience any kind of freedom in the world without is to begin becoming aware of it within, all right? Because so many humans are in this deep amnesia about who they really are. And as they wake up to that, they begin to sort of notice. It's like a little bit of a domino effect.
Yeah, yeah. And do you feel that, the more that we can sort out relationships here before we cross over, no one knows, do we? None of us know when our time's going to be. And I think it's important we realize that life is short and to make the most of it, but then life can feel long sometimes as well, right? But do you think that the more that we can heal here, not heal, the more that we don't take our issues over where we go to or where we come from, it's just better for us in a sense, or does it matter?
All right. So humans love to sort of look ahead and kind of hold on to the past, all right? And so what we want to bring your attention is to this very moment. As humans practice more and more to be in the present, they begin to sort of appreciate not simply themselves, but all that is around them. And in this appreciation, there grows a greater sense of belonging, not just within themselves, but in the world around. And in this sense of belonging grows a greater appreciation for those around them. And so many humans will often do things because they say, well, I will be rewarded in a past life. I'm going to be rewarded when I get over there, all right? That's why I'm doing it. And so we always say, well, how is it working for you right now? If you are enjoying your experience, then there's something that you are doing that is working for you. But if you're not enjoying it in the now, there's nothing that you can do that will sort of ease it up in any other place. So focus in this moment, all right? And so as more humans become more present and this appreciation grows, relationships become better. And there's no need to wait. There's no sort of wonderment of what will happen then. See, many humans, they begin this sort of journey when they get to a certain age and they say, all right, my time is coming to cross over, so I better do something about it. because right now where I am, it doesn't feel so good. So what do I do? All right. And that's all right. There's no judgment. Okay. Because whenever you sort of are much more aware of yourself and the world around you, that is the time. All right. That is the perfect time. There's no other time. So if that comes for you when you are non-physical, and for many humans, that's what happens, because that's when they gain the most relief. All right. That's when they experience the most relief. And that's when they sort of say, aha, I wish I'd been more easy about it. I wish I'd worried less. I wish I'd loved more.
Mm. But, you know, sometimes I enjoy the fight. I've got to say that, right? You know, it's like, you know, I'm in a bit of a fight right now with a few things. And if some people saw the color of my language on some of these emails, they'd be like, "Oh my God, Kevin, where did that come from?" But you know what? I'm not embarrassed about, and I mean, yes, I've got a personality for this type of show, right? But you know, I've got a life outside here, and if something triggers me, I'm not always going to think, "Oh my gosh, you know, what would a spiritual person do?" It's not. It's like, no, to do what I've got to do right now, this is just how it's going to be, right? Yeah. I don't know if that's a question. I think it's just an example of how, you know, life is for us sometimes. You know, it's not, we don't always come from the space that we're describing right here, right now.
All right. So the particular experience of being in a physical realm is very much the sort of push-pull, all right, the sort of the resistance that grows from exploring, the contrast that comes from exploring, all right? So, for example, when you are thirsty, you want to drink. And the more thirsty that you are, when you begin to drink, there's an incredible sensation that you experience from that, all right? So this is very much a function of this particular physical experience that spirit has chosen. And so those moments in which you are feeling this sort of resistance, this contrast, there is a sense of expansion there, all right? Just as in the same way that you grow your physical muscles, all right? It does not come from this sort of ease about it. There is a sense of movement, there is a sense of exertion, there is a sense of discomfort. So it is in the same way that you expand by sort of being in this play. See, you were speaking earlier about a being who chooses to sort of commit a crime, all right, or what you define as a crime. And sometimes what it is about this physical experience, because in a way you are avatars and you are projecting forth, your thinking is that your spirit has sort of chosen certain experiences to expand, all right? And so in this expansion, the contrast is a big part of it. And that's why we bring forth this perspective of no judgment. Because it's only in that you'll see all these different aspects of physical reality as a way to play. All right.
God, that makes a lot of sense. You know, what's coming to me while you're saying that, and maybe this happens for other people, is like, you know, Kev, you've got to be that arsehole sometimes, because the fight that you're about to take up with what you're about to do, you're going to, you know what's coming to you for putting out what you're about to put out. But you know what? If it feels the right thing to do and you're trying to help people with it, to show some discernment, right? You know what? If you're enjoying it in the background, that's all that matters. But I'm sure at different stages in our lives, we don't want the fight. We want to come from different energies. Do you know what I mean? But sometimes there's things that we've got to do. There is.
Yes, when you are attuned with the flow of your own experience, you sort of move onto the next moment and the next moment and the next moment and the next moment with a certain vigor. And sometimes this vigor, a big part of it, you experience it through your emotions. And emotions are very much indicators. And so sometimes humans will sort of get tricked into thinking that only certain emotions are good over others. All right. And so the thing is, emotion is, as you understand it, is energy and movement. And so when you are in movement, oftentimes you will come in contact and experience certain emotions, and that will be the only way in which you can sort of move and flow into the next moment. That is true freedom. That is true freedom. And that's how you begin to master your physical environment, because you are able to sort of move vibrationally, meaning emotionally, from moment to moment without sort of hanging up in any particular moment. And from there, you'll sort of understand all these different tools that you've been provided with, and you'll become much more of a master, all right, of playing with them.
Yes, and I know we're getting close to the end here right now, so just a couple more things leading just on from what you're saying, actually, and kind of this threads of this conversation as well. I mean, we are still a warring, well, we are not as much as a warring civilization as we used to be, I guess. But collectively, there's me talking about, the way I am sometimes, but none of us want war, do we? Do you know what I mean, on this planet? Yet we are going through massive changes, aren't we, right now? So first of all, where I'm trying to get to is, obviously we've gone through the pandemic and we're still in the back end of that. But I do feel that this is only the beginning of the change that we're going to go through as humanity goes to another level.
All right, so this sort of ties in with what we were just speaking about. As humanity collectively begins to sort of move into a brand new vibration, there's going to be resistance and contrast in that, and that's going to manifest physically. And from that, there's going to be new desire, a new generation of souls that are going to bring forth something different. And so in many ways, where you are now is exactly where you are supposed to be. And you cannot force it, all right? Because there are so many humans that are sort of wanting to kind of control the environment, sort of wanting to force what they believe to be good, and wanting to sort of eradicate what is bad. And so as you begin to transform vibrationally, this will sort of unfold on its own. And any kind of resistance will sort of bang around for a while until that energy begins to shift, until someone says, you know what, this didn't work so well. Because see, part of being a free spirit, so to speak, and what we mean by this is a being who has a free will, is the exploration of all that is available at any dimension, all right? And where humanity is, particularly in what you might consider a three-dimensional world, there are certain available options. And what you've been doing is exploring them. And as the vibration begins to shift, you begin to sort of explore more of what becomes available to you. All right. So what we are sort of witnessing from our perspective is very much an evolution of not just consciousness, but the way in which humans begin to experience the cosmos. During this time, you are becoming more and more aware of the world out there, and you're still in the sort of beginning steps of it, but there is a great yearning for sort of finally experiencing more of the cosmos and the beings that are kind of floating about. And in this desire, there is a bigger expansion that is merging forth.
Very quick yes or no questions, because I just human time, right? Are you physical in a sense, or if we went to where you were, we wouldn't see anything with our human eyes, but that's just our perception of it?
All right, so we can choose to be in any physical form that we want through manifestation as you experience it. But In our natural state, it is something that can be experienced when you sort of become a match to that vibration.
Okay. And I said this before, I'm sort of ending on this a little bit as well, is that, it's almost like, when you look at the infinite universe, you're looking at the mind of God, and it's almost like we're told that the universe is forever expanding, but I wonder if that expansion is just a sort of, an expansion of consciousness, an expansion of evolvement of the consciousness of everything as it wants to see more. It's there in a sense, and this mind of God is constantly expanding and will forever expand.
You know about infinity, which is continuity, but part of infinity is death and rebirth, all right, that you experience on this planet. It is in the same way that the universe is always expanding, and in that expansion, it is always rebirthing itself, all right? So sometimes here on planet Earth, you witness the death and rebirth of certain stars. And so that is how all of the cosmos is always expanding. And it is in the same way that you experience it in this physical reality. But what is also is expanding is always perception. And this not as just perception on planet Earth, is the perception, because as planet Earth is expanding, so are different parts of the cosmos.
Yeah, and if that's what this all is, or whatever this all is, it's pretty incredible and pretty mind-bending and all connected, I think is what we're saying here. And I guess as our understanding as our understanding increases, I guess we'll understand, maybe what the potential is. There was one more thing just to end this that I wanted to say, and it's leaving my mind slowly. Let me see if I can just pull it back in. Oh gosh, I'm going to regret this. It's going a little bit. Well, let me end this on this note then. What is an important message that you'd like to give?
All right, it's very simple. Enjoy your experience, all right? So many humans are always seeking for more expansion, more. But as you practice enjoying what is and your presence, the universe will respond in kind. All right? Because we were sharing before, when humans release themselves from a lot of their resistance they experience in the physical world and the non-physical, there's a moment when they say, I wish I'd enjoyed more. And you do not need to wait for this. Find moments to appreciate more. Find moments to be in a state of awe. And there is so much around you to be in a state of awe, to remind you to be in a state of awe.
Well, I know we're going to connect again, and in this way. Whether we're connecting in other ways, that's cool, but I know we will do. And I just thank you very much for this wonderful conversation, and blessings for coming through.
It has been very fun to share this time with you and to have this conversation with you.
All right. Well, that was interesting, Charlie. That was and none of that was really planned. And do you remember most of what was said to you when you come back?
Not usually. I'll remember sometimes later things might come through. Or like I'll think of something and then I'll notice it actually, or like it comes through and then I'll be like, oh yeah, I see that came from like the channeling. Sometimes I do pick up on stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I know that was a bit more stressful than other channelings that you've done because it's just a bit of a different energy of putting it out there right now with doing this. Um, just from having this interview with yourself, yeah,
Yeah.
you would be able to help a lot of people
Well, thank you.
with the way that you're doing it, and I know you are helping people as well. One more time, your website is for the podcast.
So it's ascension7.org. And YouTube is Charlie Wilde 7.
Okay, well, again, it's all in the descriptions, and please do support Charlie's social media and add yourself as a subscriber because you do the live stuff, and you'll be able to get to speak to Charlie there to begin with, and maybe get to ask a question. And if you want more, then you can always book her for a session as well. So. Until next time, Charlie, just thank you very, very much for coming on.
Thank you so much, Kevin. Thank you for everything that you do. It's awesome. Thank you for the energy you bring forth. Yeah. So it feels so fortunate to have shared this time with you. Thank you.